Welcome to the Questioning Our Perspective podcast, where questioning our thoughts helps you to discover the tools to change your perspective and change your life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Questioning Our Perspective. I'm your host, Aaron Matthews, and I am pumped that you're here again with me today. Today, we're talking about prioritizing the battle. So we're really talking about focusing on what really delivers value. This is about cutting through the noise and really getting to the most important thing, and that is, what do we say no to? This is going to be fantastic. So grab a coffee, grab your tea. Let's get real. I got some great thoughts and questions to push you to rethink and to question your perspective. So last episode, we built on naming and slaying the beast by learning from our past and sharing that wisdom. Now we're sharpening our focus to prioritizing the battles. This means zeroing in on what's going to deliver value. You know, whether it's efficiency, cost, savings, growth, while letting go of the distractions. It's a skill that takes years and years to perfect. And frankly, it's never really perfected. It's an ongoing challenge because there's always new things coming up. There's always new ways to go about doing something. So you need to ask yourself, are you spending energy on what delivers, or are you lost in the chaos? Let's figure that out together. So first of all, we need to understand prioritization. So we need to be able to prioritize the battles that we're going to have. So in any project and in life, if you ever feel like you're juggling dozens of balls and you're about to drop them, that's chaos. And that's what I've spent my life stepping into. Step into chaos, turn it into organization to ensure it's really driving value. That's what I do. So let me help with maybe some ways we can think differently about that chaos, that we can question our own perspective and think of it not really as chaos, but opportunities, because every bit of chaos is an opportunity to grow, whether it's as an individual, as a team, or as an organization. I've learned the hard way that not everything deserves your time. Prioritizing is about picking the fights that deliver value. Things like hitting deadlines, cutting costs, or boosting results. So here's a big question. Are you letting every task pull on you? Or are you choosing where to strike hardest? Let's bring this to life with some solid insights. Here's a quote from Stephen Covey from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says, quote, "Most of us spend too much time on what is urgent and not enough time on what is important. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. This requirement is a paradigm shift, moving from a reactive to a proactive mindset, where you control your time rather than letting it control you. That's the heart of it. I've seen this play out so many times. In fact, there's a great example. Many of you have probably seen the movie Apollo 13. Well, in that movie, it depicts the real-life mission of Apollo 13 in 1970, when an oxygen tank exploded. NASA had to prioritize the most important things. Number one, oxygen. If those astronauts didn't have oxygen, they weren't going to live to be able to get them back home. Power. If they didn't have power, they didn't have heat. Space is a little cold. They would have frozen. And then re-entry. And this was over less critical systems. And so they had to save the crew. Because they did that, because they prioritized painstakingly, they were able to get that crew back safely. And it's an absolute miracle. In my own work, this comes up all the time. And if you're in business, you probably see it constantly, especially in, your daily life, in meetings. Somebody will bring something up and inevitably the whole conversation will go sideways. You're not talking about what you need to be talking about, and you spend 45 minutes of your hour meeting going down a road that wasn't useful. The trick is to be able to have enough comfort within your team to call people out, to simply say, hey, is that leading us down the right path? Or can we table that for later? I'm sure you've heard that many times. Or, is that something that is really helping us get to our goal today? Usually, when you ask questions like that in a meeting, it can help reprioritize. But here is another thing that you can do. It's called the Eisenhower matrix. And in fact, if you remember that Stephen Covey quote, he really talks to the heart of it. The Eisenhower matrix is doing what is urgent and important. Those things should get your focus. Everything else either gets delegated, it gets put off till later, or it gets completely taken off the list. And that's what, like I started out saying, that's the most important thing. What are you going to say no to? Because it's easy to say yes, and we all say yes, and we all get overwhelmed with things. But what are you going to say no to? So ask yourself, what is one task you can drop that's going to help you prioritize value? Try that this week. Here's some extra fuel. Peter Drucker in The Effective Executive writes, quote, "Efficiency is doing things right, but effectiveness is doing the right things. Results are obtained by exploiting opportunities, not by solving problems. This means focusing on opportunities that align with your goals rather than getting bogged down in fixing every issue." Close quote. This is a wake-up call. Prioritizing isn't just about fixing things. It's about seizing what moves the needle. Too many leaders chase problems instead of value. Are you guilty of that? Am I guilty of that? Are you exploiting opportunities, or are you just firefighting? Most projects that I step into are exactly that. They're firefighting. The reason that they're in such chaos is because everyone is firefighting. And honestly, oftentimes it's people don't write things down. Once you name the chaos, going back to the initial, in episode 1, we talked about, you have to name the chaos, name the beast, write it down. Once you do that, you can start to organize and you can start to bring calm to the chaos, because once you name the beast, it's not as scary. Once you start to name, hey, we're getting off topic here. Should we get back to this? That's how you slowly move the needle in your organization. That's how you bring that calm to that chaos. It's really about prioritizing. So what is the one high value priority you can tackle this week to slay your beast? Let's make it count. Think of your current projects, or you could even think of your current life. What's draining you that you can let go? Jot it down if it clicks. I'd love to hear your thoughts later. Like, comment, the usual. One of the things I want to do is question my own perspective. I remember the story of an AI company that I was hired into, and I was hired to build out a PMO, a project management organization. But the CEO said this wasn't a priority. I got kind of annoyed because my boss had hired me in specifically to do that. And at the time I was thinking, what in the world, why isn't the CEO seeing the value of this? But let's question our own perspective. Let's take a look at that and learn from it. In looking at it from the CEO's perspective, that CEO was prioritizing the most important things that she saw. They might not have been important to me. I might have felt like there was a different direction to go. But that CEO is at the helm and sees things much differently than I do. Now, 3 years later, it's become much clearer, especially as I start my own business. And you're going out and you're like, well, all right, I may have the right processes and stuff to deliver value, but wait a second, I don't have clients. That can be a problem. And that CEO is prioritizing the things that were delivering value. And so for me, that was one of the ways that I questioned my own perspective and saying, I was prioritizing one thing, but what are they prioritizing? And it's always on us to ask ourselves, especially as leaders, am I seeing all sides of this? Because once you do see those other sides, suddenly your priorities can align. And once your priorities align, that is the biggest thing to drive an organization or drive value forward, is prioritizing and aligning where the value is coming from. So how do we implement this? Let's get practical. How do we actually prioritize to deliver value? This is where the rubber hits the road. I've seen projects derail because teams couldn't say no. In a project where they're just spreading themselves too thin, implementing prioritization means aligning every move with what drives results, efficiencies, savings, and growth. So ask yourselves, are you equipping your team to focus, or are you all chasing shadows? Let's dig into that. Learning to prioritize can pay dividends. Here's a quote from Eric Rice in The Lean Startup. Quote, "Startups waste time building products no one wants because they don't validate assumptions early. The only way to win is to learn what customers really want quickly by testing, hypothesis, and prioritizing ruthlessly. This requires a build, measure, learn loop where priorities shift based on real feedback rather than guesses." Close quote. That's actionable. Look at Dropbox. Early on, they prioritized a simple demo over a full product. And that validated demand. And they end up growing 60% in a day. So imagine that. In a normal project, say waterfall versus agile, they would have had to create the entire product and then bring it. And what would that have done? It would have wasted millions of dollars, a lot of time, and they wouldn't have known if the product was exactly what the clients wanted. That's one of the beautiful things we learned from Agile is we need to set clear criteria. Value, urgency, impact, review it weekly. So what's your next step? How can you ruthlessly prioritize for your team? Let's give it a shot. Here's a striking point by John P. Cotter in Leading Change. He writes, quote, "Without a sense of urgency, transformation efforts stall as people revert to old habits. Creating a sense of urgency around the right priorities can mobilize an organization to act. This urgency must be authentic, tied to real opportunities or threats, and drive sustained effort." Close quote. That's powerful. Prioritizing needs momentum. To many teams, they drift without focus. Are you rallying your people around what delivers? What's one priority you can champion this week to drive value? Maybe a quick meeting to realign. In a previous podcast, I shared about the ED Charge Assist project that we actually had to stop really before it got going because there was so much chaos that it made me question, are we going in the right direction even? But doing that forced us to reset the whole contract and forced us to have two projects because we realized we had value defined differently for the different shareholders. And this can be the right thing. You need to question that perspective and making sure that you're driving the right value for the organization and for the project or program. We unpacked quite a bit today. Prioritizing the battle, focusing on what delivers, is your weapon slaying the beast. I'm challenging you. Are you zeroing in on what matters? Are you leading your team to value? Pick one action today, a task or set a priority meeting, and let me know how it goes. Set that meeting, have radical candor in the meeting, and make sure that the value that you're looking at, everyone agrees to. And that's actually the value that everyone's driving towards. Because if it's not, you may need to question your perspective, question your goal. And in your life, these same principles apply. We should all be questioning what we're doing if it's not working. So thank you for listening. I hope you find value in this. If you do, please drop a comment below, engage with me. I'd love to get your feedback on challenges you've had and might even bring them up in the podcast here. Thank you for your time. Have a great day. This has been the Question Your Perspective podcast with Aaron Matthews.